Once, something happened that I never expected. I took my husband to the doctor for his usual checkup, but instead of everything being fine, the doctor said something really serious. Dr. Lawrence looked very serious and told me something shocking about my husband. I felt really scared and couldn't believe what I was hearing. My husband, who I always looked after when he was sick, was now someone I was afraid of. The doctor even said I might need to keep away from him for my own safety. This made me feel really anxious and frightened. Hi, I'm Betty Frieden, and I've spent the last decade working at a big pharmaceutical company. It's like a second home to me, a place where I feel comfortable and like I belong. Even though I'm 50, I still work full-time, and my coworkers really respect me for it. Not many people my age are still working, but I've always enjoyed it. I think part of the reason I'm so dedicated to my job is because I didn't get married until 4 years ago. My boss, Gerald, and I are close, maybe because we're both single. Once he jokingly asked if I was ever going to tie the knot, but I knew he was just teasing. Around that time, I was seeing Richard secretly, who later became my husband. Richard's a bit older, was married before, and like me, he didn't want kids. We met through a matchmaking service for people looking for companionship in their later years. We decided to keep our relationship a secret, not telling anyone about our plans, even though our boss joked about marriage. Eventually, Richard and I quietly got married without any big ceremony, just signing papers at City Hall. I was surprised by how simple it all was, but I was really looking forward to our life together. But then, with Dr. Lawrence's worrying advice, I had to rethink everything. My caring feelings for my sick husband were now mixed up with fear and doubt. Dr. Lawrence's words kept playing in my head, telling me I needed to do something to stay safe. Standing there, trying to understand what was happening, I realized I had to make a decision, and quickly. Suddenly, the life I knew and the future I imagined felt uncertain. I'm LA, and my husband Richard works at a factory. Honestly, I make more money than he does. Richard got his job right after high school. As for me, I grew up in an orphanage and always wanted to be independent. That's why I didn't want to quit my job at the pharmaceutical company after we got married. I loved my job too much. When Richard and I got married, I told my manager Gerald right away. He congratulated me, but I could tell he had mixed feelings. Maybe he felt a bit lonely because his single buddy got married first. I tried joking with him about it, but he didn't seem to want to talk about it, so I dropped it. Despite Gerald's reaction, I was really happy about starting this new chapter with Richard. I imagined all the great things our future would bring. But reality wasn't as bright as I'd hoped. Life as newlyweds was pretty ordinary. Not much changed for me. I kept working, and the biggest change was moving to a more rural area and driving instead of taking the bus. Richard and I shared my old car because he didn't have one. About a year into our marriage, things started to get tough. Richard started showing signs of being depressed. He seemed different, barely eating breakfast, lost in thought, and even mixing up simple things like condiments. His clothes didn't match, and he became quieter both at work and at home. While I always admired Richard's quiet strength, his silence became too much, making it feel like I was living alone. This loneliness crept up on me as I noticed these small but important changes in him. I realized that Richard might be struggling with a mental health issue. Watching someone you care about struggle without knowing how to help is really tough. So I took Richard to a clinic that focuses on both mind and body health, where he was diagnosed with depression. I had a basic understanding of depression, but hearing the diagnosis made everything feel a bit darker. The doctor explained that the best way to deal with depression is to address its main cause directly. Finding the exact cause of Richard's depression was tough. He had been working at the same factory for years without any problems, and nothing major had changed in his job. If anything, I worried that maybe our marriage had something to do with it. But when we talked to the doctor, I told him we were happy together and couldn't see any obvious problems at home that might have caused Richard's depression. The doctor told us to come back if we noticed any changes or had any ideas about what might be causing it. But even after several visits to the clinic, we couldn't figure out why Richard was feeling so down. As time went on, his depression just got worse. On his worst days, he could hardly get out of bed. Sometimes he'd have headaches, or he'd call in sick to work. His appetite disappeared, and he noticeably lost weight. Eventually, he couldn't keep working and had to quit his job. Richard felt really guilty about relying on me financially, but I told him I was okay with it. My main concern was his health. It was hard to see him struggling so much, and I worried about him constantly, especially when I was at work. There was a scary moment when he got lost while out, which made me worry he might not just be dealing with depression, but maybe dementia too. This idea added to my stress. When coworkers asked how things were going, I had to admit that Richard wasn't getting better. Watching someone you love suffer so much without knowing how to help is really tough. One day, Gerald noticed I looked exhausted and gave me an energy drink. Drinking it made me feel a bit better, and I was touched by his support. He reminded me that we're all in this together, and his words nearly made me cry. With everything going on with Richard, I hadn't realized how much stress I'd been carrying. I realized I had to hold myself together, or I might fall apart too. So I focused on my work, trying to keep some normalcy in our lives. A year passed, and things with Richard didn't get better. They actually got worse. As our third wedding anniversary neared, I couldn't see any hope for his condition. Then one morning, I noticed our car was missing. I checked again, but it was definitely gone. Since Richard's diagnosis, I was the only one who drove it, and I hadn't used it since the day before, so it should have been at home. Worried, I asked Richard if he knew anything about where the car might be. He casually mentioned he thought it was there when he got home yesterday. I remembered he had gone out for a bit while I was at work. The doctor had suggested he try walking or jogging to help him cope. If the car was there when he came back, it must have disappeared sometime during the night. With the car gone, I had no choice but to use public transport, which made me about 10 minutes late for work. I told Gerald about the missing car, and although he understood that he was puzzled too, he wondered if Richard might have taken it, but I didn't think so, considering Richard's condition and how he avoided driving since he got sick. It just didn't add up. Despite Richard's memory lapses and mood swings, I couldn't imagine him being behind the missing car. The car mystery added another layer of complexity to our already difficult situation. As soon as I realized the car was gone, I reported it to the police, hoping it would be found soon. But deep down, I worried it might be gone for good. And if that wasn't enough, something else strange happened on the day I was supposed to get my paycheck. I went to the bank and found my personal account was empty. I was shocked. We did have a shared account, which I checked next, only to find it was empty too. I was completely puzzled. Richard and I shared a joint account, but he didn't have access to my personal account and he didn't know its PIN. Yet, somehow, all our savings were gone. I felt a cold shock wash over me, and when I got home, I confronted Richard. I asked him if he knew anything about the missing money from our joint account. He seemed genuinely confused and denied knowing anything about it. Because of his depression, I hesitated to push him further, worried it might make things worse for him. Richard looked distant, lost in one of his frequent dazes caused by his condition. I couldn't help but wonder if he could have taken the money without realizing it. Planning to discuss this with the police, I felt overwhelmed by the double blow of losing both our car and our savings. The financial strain was tough, especially since I didn't have family to fall back on. With the small community clinic unable to provide enough help for Richard, we decided to switch him to a larger hospital with more resources. They gave us a referral letter, so we took a taxi to our first appointment at the general hospital. The whole experience was new and a bit scary for me, and I felt uneasy throughout the journey. Richard stayed quiet, lost in his thoughts as we arrived at the hospital. Taking a deep breath, I walked in and handed over the referral letter at the reception, expecting a wait. The general hospital was bustling with patients, each waiting for their turn. After about an hour, Richard was called in for his consultation. While he went inside, I took out a book to pass the time. But hardly had Richard entered the doctor's office when a nurse approached me. "Excuse me, are you Mrs. Simmons?" she asked. I confirmed, and she said the doctor wanted to see me. Familiar with discussing Richard's condition, I assumed it was a routine matter and followed her, though with some anxiety. The nurse led me to a different room, where a doctor, about 10 years older than me with graying hair and a gentle manner, greeted me. Before I could even sit down, I asked if this was about Richard's condition. He nodded seriously, and I braced myself for potential bad news. The doctor's next words caught me completely off guard. He advised me to keep my distance from my husband, revealing that Richard had been arrested for fraud a decade ago. My mind was racing with confusion. Why was this coming up now, during a routine medical visit? The doctor explained his suspicions about Richard's depression, suggesting that he might be faking it. He recalled recognizing Richard from a surgery 10 years back. where he had treated a deep cut on Richard's leg. It was a shock. I had thought we were addressing Richard's mental health, only to uncover his hidden past and a potential deception about his current condition. This unexpected revelation left me stunned, trying to reconcile the caring husband I knew with the person the doctor described. When the doctor mentioned recognizing a large scar on Richard's right leg, everything clicked into place. I knew about the scar but never knew how he got it, as Richard had never mentioned it. Finding out that the doctor before me was the one who had treated Richard's injury years ago felt like an unbelievable twist of fate. The doctor's revelation continued, unveiling that Richard had injured himself during a confrontation with his former wife, stemming from his fraudulent actions against her. He had stolen her luxury possessions and money. Shockingly, he had even pretended to have dementia during that period, tricking his wife into lowering her guard before committing the fraud. This repeated behavior of feigning illness to aid his deception was horrifying. Learning about Richard's criminal history and his arrest was overwhelming. I hadn't investigated Richard's past before marrying him. Having been alone for most of my life, I was just grateful to find someone willing to be my partner. The doctor's grave warning that Richard could pose a threat to me sent shivers down my spine. There was a gravity in his tone that made it clear this was a serious issue. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been deceived. In the days that followed, I struggled to maintain a facade of normalcy around Richard while secretly plotting my next moves. I made the decision to install surveillance cameras throughout our home to monitor Richard's actions when I wasn't present. About a week later, I noticed that a watch and bag were missing. Upon reviewing the footage from the cameras, I saw Richard leaving the house with them and returning later with a stack of cash, looking oddly pleased with himself. His behavior didn't match that of someone suffering from depression. This footage confirmed my worst suspicions. Richard was responsible for stealing my belongings, the car, and our savings. Confronted with undeniable evidence of his deceit, I felt crushed. Richard had lied to me and manipulated me, betraying the trust I had placed in him. It became clear that I needed to take significant action against someone who had pretended to be vulnerable and in need of care, only to exploit my compassion and generosity. The realization that Richard had betrayed my trust was agonizing. I had devoted myself to working and caring for what I believed was an ailing partner. Divorce seemed like too feeble a response to the profound deceit I had endured. It was evident that we needed to go our separate ways. But I desired more than just a mere separation. I wanted Richard to fully grasp the seriousness of his actions and to rectify the harm he had caused. With a heavy heart and tears threatening to spill, I gathered the divorce papers and meticulously completed them with all the necessary details. The next day, feigning normalcy, I informed Richard that I needed to step out briefly. I had already arranged to take a day off from work, explaining the urgency of my situation to my understanding employer, who had granted me the sudden leave. At the police station, I presented my case, displaying the footage I had captured of Richard's deception to the officers. Initially, they seemed hesitant to take action based solely on the video evidence. However, after confirming with the pawn shop where Richard had sold the stolen items and tracking down my car being sold as a used vehicle, the evidence against him began to accumulate. It was also discovered that he had illegally accessed my bank accounts, raising suspicions about his purported depression. As the truth came to light, I was flooded with a complex mix of relief and sorrow. The police decided to move swiftly given Richard's criminal history, and they prepared to arrest him. Upon returning home with the officers in the early afternoon, I found Richard there, visibly taken aback by my unexpected return and the presence of the police. Despite the divorce papers clutched in my hand, his focus remained on the officers as one of them announced his arrest for fraud. Richard attempted to protest, citing his depression as a defense, but I knew better. The doctor from the general hospital had already cast doubt on the legitimacy of his claims regarding his mental health condition. In that pivotal moment, as the weight of both the legal repercussions and the dissolution of our marriage settled on him, Richard's facade began to crumble. Choosing this course of action was agonizing but essential to safeguard myself and pursue justice for the betrayal and manipulation I had endured. At the police station, my sudden eruption of emotion caught even the officers off guard, but it seemed to finally pierce through Richard's veneer of composure. As the police placed him in handcuffs, Richard's facade of defiance cracked. He appeared defeated, his bravado replaced by frustration as he was escorted away. Observing the scene unfold, I felt strangely detached, as though I were watching the unraveling of someone else's life. Since the doctor's sobering warning, reality had felt distorted. Yet here I stood, confronting the stark truth of my circumstances, determined to forge ahead from the chaos Richard had wrought. Witnessing Richard being escorted away by the police felt surreal, akin to a scene from a dream. This moment marked a significant turning point, offering a glimpse of a return to the life I had known before the tumult of marriage consumed it. While a sense of relief washed over me, knowing I would no longer be ensnared in Richard's manipulative grasp, it was followed by a wave of loneliness. After waiting over 47 years to marry, the prospect of solitude once again loomed over my newfound liberation. 2 months later, our divorce was officially finalized. The process had been slightly delayed due to Richard's arrest, but as everything became official, my emotions had settled, allowing me to reflect on our shared history with clarity. Richard's future was uncertain, facing imprisonment for his second offense. I could only hope that this experience would prompt him to genuinely reconsider his choices. In the aftermath of our marriage, which had disintegrated into nothing more than a disillusioning memory, I found myself contemplating my next steps during a simple lunch at work. It was then that my boss, Gerald, approached, casually making a remark as he joined me with his store-bought hot dog lunch. "I think you'd be just fine if you were with me," he said, almost casually. His words caught me off guard, and it took a moment for their full weight to sink in, leaving me momentarily flustered. "Yes, I'm serious," he added, noticing my hesitation, his tone smooth yet sincere. I was left speechless, my lunch momentarily forgotten, as I processed his proposition. Gerald then returned to work, leaving me to mull over his unexpected offer. In the days that followed, the thought of a romantic relationship with Gerald hadn't crossed my mind, yet I couldn't ignore the care and stability he had consistently shown me. His dependable presence and responsible demeanor suddenly seemed to shine in a new light. Despite my initial surprise as I continued eating, the possibilities Gerald had introduced began to take root, hinting at a future I hadn't dared to consider until now. The idea of inviting Gerald out for a meal after work ignited a warmth within me, sparking a glimmer of hope for what lay ahead. Perhaps this was the perfect moment to embark on a fresh journey, exploring the potential for happiness and companionship once again. Stepping out of my comfort zone and into a new beginning with someone who had always been kind and supportive felt both exhilarating and reassuring. Tonight, I resolved, could mark the beginning of something wonderful and new. My name is Cindy, a 35-year-old office worker. I met my husband Joe through a colleague at work, sort of a blind date, and we ended up getting married. Joe and I are the same age and share similar hobbies, so I anticipated a joyful life together. Joe's parents were cheerful and kind. My mother-in-law once said, "We were worried because Joe hadn't brought home a single potential bride until now. Please take good care of Joe." Her words stung a bit, considering I'm his age too, but I chose to ignore it. A year has passed since our wedding. Though we sometimes argued, and Joe would often bring up divorce during those moments, I thought it was just part of married life. Despite this, we generally got along well. On weekends, we enjoyed driving and taking day trips, a hobby we had shared even before getting married. While I used to travel alone frequently, we now did everything as a couple. Joe lived with his parents until we got married, using their car when he went out. Since then, we've been using my car, which is nearing its end. I originally drove a compact car because I liked the design and rarely had passengers, but I was now considering buying a new one before the next inspection. When I discussed this with Joe, he agreed, saying, "It's your car, so do as you like. But if you're going to replace it, why not get a larger car instead of a compact?" I agreed with his suggestion. The following weekend, we went to look at cars together. As we began looking at cars, Joe grew increasingly excited. He pointed out an expensive model, praising its performance, spacious interior, and overall quality. Despite its appeal, I hesitated due to the high costs, which I hadn't planned for. Joe suggested, "How about I take out a loan in my name? We both drive about the same amount, and the payments would come from our household budget." Although it didn't matter who took the loan, his suggestion seemed practical, and we decided to explore that option. We looked at other cars, but we liked the first one best and decided on it. However, the loan application in Joe's name was denied, likely because he had just changed jobs. Joe became angry and snapped at the clerk. "I'm saying I'll buy it. Can't you do something about it?" This is one of the things I dislike about Joe. He often has a condescending attitude towards staff, no matter the store. When I tried to calm him down, he got upset and went outside to smoke. Joe can be domineering and quick to threaten divorce when things don't go his way, which is exhausting. I apologized profusely to the salesperson. Maybe it would be easier to get a loan for a smaller amount. If the car is cheaper, I could pay it in full, I suggested while consulting with the salesperson. Just then, Joe returned. "Hey, why not buy it under Cindy's name? I'll be the one paying anyway," he said, leaving me to ponder the situation. Actually, I found Joe's suggestion appealing. None of the other cars resonated with me the same way. I nodded and signed the documents. They said it would take a few months for the car to be delivered. In the meantime, I drove around in my old car, cherishing our last moments together. One day, as my husband sat in the passenger seat, fiddling with his smartphone, he remarked, "Finally bidding farewell to this cramped space, huh?" During the drive, I let him take the wheel and casually glanced at his phone left on the dashboard. A message caught my eye. "Did you get a new car? And it's a luxury car at that." It was from one of Joe's colleagues. Joe seemed to be showing off our new car. Given his vanity, he likely hadn't mentioned that the car was purchased under my name. Though I thought it mattered, this car ultimately changed our fate. 3 months later, the first place we went in our newly delivered car was to my in-laws' house. We visited to celebrate my father-in-law's retirement, a visit my husband always emphasized as important to honor his parents. When my father-in-law greeted us, he excitedly examined the car and exclaimed, "So this is the new car. It's so cool." I suggested, "Let's go out together in it next time," to which he responded with delight. My mother-in-law also chimed in, "I want to go too. How about a spa trip?" She seemed excited, so I started making plans, taking their wishes into account. At my in-laws, we had a wonderful time reminiscing about my father-in-law's work and my husband's childhood. One memorable comment from my mother-in-law was, "I really wanted a daughter. I thought it would be fun to go out and share clothes with her, but instead, I gave birth to Big Joe." She then added, "So Cindy, if you don't mind, let's go out together next time." I was thrilled. However, my husband didn't seem to find this amusing. Although my mother-in-law was only joking and hadn't implied he was unwanted, he sulked. Before we got married, I found his pouting cute, but it has become a bit annoying with how frequently it happens. Perhaps because his parents were present, my husband refrained from saying anything, but he often used the threat of divorce to manipulate me into compliance. Despite the tension, we managed to navigate the situation and returned home. The following day, after returning from work, my husband entered the living room and announced, "The luxury car you bought will be a gift for my dad. If you disagree, we might as well divorce, right?" Initially, I thought he was joking and tried to brush it off, but it became evident he was dead serious. "Wait, why are you bringing this up now?" I asked, puzzled. Dad was eyeing that car with envy. The best way to honor my parents' retirement is by gifting him that car and letting him enjoy it, he insisted firmly. I was taken aback by his sudden demand, but Joe remained adamant and refused to compromise. He's always been stubborn, and there are moments when he becomes irate if I don't go along with his wishes. Annoyed, I attempted to reason with him, saying, "We agreed to spend time with your father together, didn't we? Giving the car as a gift is..." But he wasn't open to discussion. The argument escalated, and Joe began to lose his temper. As their only son, I feel it's my duty to give something back to Mom and Dad. I want them to appreciate having a son, not a daughter. Joe seemed still affected by his mother's comment about wishing for a daughter. Perhaps he felt competitive after his mother expressed interest in going out with me. I was stunned. We couldn't possibly afford to give such an expensive gift. Why don't we plan a trip to a hot spring resort instead? We talked about this yesterday, didn't we? But Joe remained dissatisfied, glaring at me. "I married you, a woman past her prime, didn't I? You have nothing to boast about. Do you even realize who is responsible for the life we're leading? Just once, listen to what I have to say." His harsh words chilled my feelings for Joe instantly. Past her prime, huh? I was aware of it, but hearing someone else say it was infuriating. After all, I managed the household chores, which put me in a better position than Joe, who couldn't do much around the house. Besides, I was also contributing financially, and our livelihood didn't depend solely on Joe's salary. With these thoughts, the aspects of Joe that grated on me began to surface. His treatment of waitstaff, his tendency to sulk, his stubbornness. I had tried to overlook these traits, but now they were starting to wear on me. As these thoughts churned in my mind, Joe left the room and returned with something in his hand. "Ha!" I exclaimed when he handed me divorce papers. As I looked up in surprise, he said, "Just sign the car ownership transfer document. If you're not okay with it, you can fill out the divorce papers and leave. It's up to you." To my disbelief, the divorce papers were already filled out. "That's enough," I muttered, feeling fed up. "Fine." As I signed the document, Joe nodded with satisfaction, casually discarding the divorce papers and retreating to his room. The next day, Joe handed me the necessary documents for the car's title transfer, asking, "Can we transfer the title even though we just took out a loan?" I took the documents, pondering his question. To be certain, I decided to consult the dealership where we purchased the car. It turned out that transferring the title while a loan was still active posed significant challenges. Additionally, since the ownership change required my father-in-law's approval, it couldn't be the surprise gift Joe envisioned. Besides, my father-in-law had never expressed a desire for a car. I thought if I explained this to Joe, he might abandon the idea. I also explored the option of selling the car. Now that it felt tainted by our recent conflict, I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep driving it. The model was popular and production couldn't keep up with demand, so selling it could fetch a high price. With that money, I could pay off the loan and choose a new car that I truly liked. When I arrived home from work and explained to Joe the complications of changing the car's title due to the loan, he responded sharply, "Then we'll just have to buy another car. Dad will be thrilled for sure." "I'm sorry, but Dad never expressed a desire for a car," I countered. "Well, then it looks like we're really going to get divorced," Joe muttered before storming off to his room. I reached my breaking point. I had been willing to work through things if he apologized, but I couldn't continue the marriage under these circumstances. I made the decision to pack my belongings. Simultaneously, I arranged to sell the car. The dealership offering the highest price agreed to collect it at a later date. A sense of relief washed over me. I planned to move out while Joe was at work the following week, putting an end to everything. With this resolve in mind, I finished my shift on Friday and returned home, only to find the car missing from its usual spot in the parking lot. "What?" I hurried inside to check if the car keys were still where I left them. "They're gone." Panic set in as I dialed Joe's number repeatedly. Despite my efforts, he didn't answer, nor did he read my messages asking him to contact me. Did Joe take the car somewhere? But that car is already 3 hours later. I finally received a message from him. He explained he was on a trip with a colleague and suggested we both needed time to cool down. "What?" I exclaimed involuntarily, my voice rising as I stared at my phone screen in frustration. If Joe was on a trip, it meant he wouldn't be back tonight. I wasted no time and swiftly set my plans into motion, plans I had carefully laid out over the past few days. I called a real estate agent I knew from work and finalized the lease on the apartment he had reserved for me. I also arranged for a moving company to relocate all my belongings, furniture, appliances, everything. By the next morning, the movers had efficiently packed and transported everything to my new place. By mid-afternoon, I had settled into my new life. With the weight lifted off my shoulders, I found myself dozing off. Suddenly, my phone rang, startling me awake. It was Joe calling. He must have returned home, discovered my absence, and was likely taken aback enough to call. I couldn't help but smirk a little as I answered the phone. "Cindy, can you help me?" Joe's voice came through the phone, frantic and alarmed. It was clear he wasn't at home. "I had an accident, and my insurance isn't covering it." Confused, I replied, "What?" Joe's frustration grew evident. "That's why the new car's insurance. I called them after the accident, but they're saying it's not covered." As I pieced together his words, realization dawned. "What do you mean you had an accident? Where are you? Are you hurt?" I asked, attempting to sound concerned despite my mixed emotions. It wasn't my fault. The other party wasn't paying attention. But more importantly, what about the insurance? Joe sighed heavily. "I thought I made myself clear, didn't I? I told you not to use the car for now, Joe. You said you understood it, right? So why did you take it out without asking? We agreed to let each other know when using the car separately. Does none of that matter now?" Cindy took over, calling the insurance company from my end. Hearing the word accident made me nervous, but if he had the energy to shout, it probably wasn't too serious. I calmly laid out the situation. The car was reported stolen. When I got home, it was gone, so I reported it to the police. In fact, it was scheduled to be sold today, and now you're telling me there's been an accident. What am I supposed to do? I canceled the insurance because the sale was finalized. I canceled it when I told you not to touch the car. Upon hearing this, my husband, or rather, my soon-to-be ex-husband, began to panic. Whoa, wait a minute. Even if I was driving our car, it shouldn't be reported stolen, Cindy. Please withdraw the theft report first. I understand about the insurance. We can discuss the financials when I get back home, but I couldn't simply accept his words. By the way, I almost forgot to mention, you and I are now strangers. I filed for divorce 3 days ago, and it's been approved. Also, I'm not living in that house anymore. He shouted these words over the phone, but I hung up anyway. After hanging up, his calls continued relentlessly, so I eventually turned off my phone to get some peace. The next day, I took a day off from work to organize my room. When I switched my phone back on in the morning, it was flooded with missed calls from my ex-husband. There was even a call around 1 a.m., likely when he returned home. But he was the one who hastily filed for divorce, and he was the one who used divorce as a threat. If he believed that mentioning divorce would make me comply with his demands, he was mistaken. Initially, when we first married, I might have given in to avoid the embarrassment of divorce so soon after tying the knot at 35. Perhaps that's why he assumed I would comply again. However, as I sorted through my room and reflected on everything, all those pent-up frustrations finally pushed me past my hesitations. My phone rang again. Assuming it was my ex-husband, I checked, only to see it was a call from my mother-in-law. I received a call from Joe yesterday. He mentioned something about an accident and you leaving, but I couldn't make sense of it. What's going on? She asked, concerned. I took a deep breath and explained everything to her. I apologized to you and father-in-law, but the divorce is final. Regarding the money for the car and dividing our belongings, I'm planning to arrange a meeting to discuss it soon. Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law apologized profusely and said, if it's all right with you, could I attend that meeting? I'm worried Joe might say something unreasonable. I agreed to hold the post-divorce meeting at my in-laws' house. When I visited my in-laws after a long while, I found my father-in-law scolding my ex-husband. My mother-in-law noticed my arrival and invited me into the living room. As expected, my ex-husband was sulking, but a stern word from his father made him reluctantly lower his head. She mentioned that because you only do what you want, her life is in shambles. My father-in-law chastised him. That's when I revealed that I had sought legal advice regarding his constant threats of divorce, which could be deemed emotional abuse. My ex-husband's face drained of color upon hearing this. After some negotiation, we reached an agreement. He would cover the initial costs of the new car and the expenses related to retracting the theft report, with my father-in-law making up the difference. As I was leaving, my mother-in-law expressed regret, saying, it's a shame we couldn't spend more time together, Cindy. I replied, if it's all right with you, let's do it again sometime, and took my leave. It turned out that the colleagues my husband had shown off the car to on that fateful day were also present during the accident. They learned everything. The car was registered in my name, we were divorced, and the car had been reported stolen. Gossip spread through his workplace, and he became the subject of ridicule behind his back. Around this time, there was talk of a transfer, which he eagerly accepted due to discomfort in his current role. However, it turned out to be more of a demotion, sending him to a rural area. Expecting convenience stores and laundromats for daily needs, he found nothing nearby. The nearest supermarket was a 30-minute drive away, and there were no laundromats in sight. Recently, Catherine, who had invited me for a meal, expressed hesitancy about asking him how he was managing household chores. She was pleasantly surprised when I agreed to meet her, and now we've developed a close friendship. I'm content now. I've purchased a new car within my budget and enjoy solo trips, just like I did before. That good-for-nothing wife. Just ditch that woman before we get into real trouble. I overheard my husband Brad and his mother say as they thought I was asleep. Their attitudes had completely changed. They left home, but shamelessly returned, claiming they didn't want to lose their assets, and began causing chaos. When I confronted them with the reality of our situation, their true colors showed. My name is Daisy. I'm 30 years old. After dating Brad for 5 years, we got engaged and moved in with his parents. Initially, we agreed to buy our own house when we had our first child. Nearly 2 years have passed without a child, and we're still living with his parents. Living with Brad, his mother, and his younger brother, I often became a subject of concern for those around me. My parents lived far away and couldn't help, but my husband was always kind, and I had a good relationship with my mother-in-law, which made me happy. One day, I had an accident and broke a bone, ending up hospitalized and unable to move on my own. At first, my husband and mother-in-law visited me daily, showing their concern, but soon, their visits dwindled to once a week. Despite being grateful for their visits, my world shattered when I overheard their conversation after the doctor informed me I might have lasting injuries. She can't do housework or anything, but she's going to cost us more than ever. What a useless wife, Brad sneered. With her lingering issues, having kids is even more out of the question. Maybe it's a good thing we don't have kids. If she stays bedridden, I'll have to do all the housework and care for her. I didn't sign up for this, he continued. I didn't either, his mother chimed in. She was supposed to do the housework and caregiving. If she hadn't gotten into that accident, she could have continued as our maid. What a disappointment. Before this becomes too troublesome, get rid of her. I'll divorce her quickly, Brad agreed. Thinking I was asleep, they had this conversation in my hospital room. To them, I was nothing more than a maid and caregiver. Their attitudes became blatantly cold afterward. Your husband hardly comes anymore, does he? He must be searching for a new woman. Only you had a child, you might have kept him, my mother-in-law taunted. As Brad's visits became even less frequent, she seemed to take pleasure in saying nasty things. However, my brother-in-law stepped up. He did the laundry, checked if I needed anything, and was generally very helpful. He visited me nearly every day and even took me outside in my wheelchair, providing a small comfort in an otherwise painful time. When I felt suffocated by my long hospitalization, I was often exhausted from physical therapy and sometimes wanted to give up. But I think I've made it this far thanks to my brother-in-law. His presence was an immense help to me. Although I'm not getting worse and physical therapy is going well, it's still uncertain if there will be any lasting issues. When I told my husband and mother-in-law about this, they started arguing. Seriously? See, I told you we should have gotten rid of her sooner, my mother-in-law scoffed. What are you two even saying? Aren't you being too harsh on Daisy, who's been taking care of our house and our father all this time? My brother-in-law retorted. In reality, I had been caring for my father-in-law for 5 years while dating my husband. When we started dating, Brad's parents suggested, why don't you live together since you're going to get married anyway? It's a great deal. We can save money, live together, and then get married when we're settled, they added. When I hesitated, they reassured me, it's okay. We have plenty of rooms and we won't invade your privacy. Plus, you don't need to pay rent. You want to marry my son, right? How could I refuse? But in return, they had a favor to ask. Daisy, while you're working from home, can you look after our father who needs care? It's only for 4 to 5 hours during the day when I'm out for my part-time job, Brad's mother asked. We also have my brother, so the two of you can work together. My brother-in-law, who also worked from home, and I teamed up to take care of my father-in-law. My father-in-law and brother-in-law were very close. My father-in-law had a hobby of collecting furniture and even had a separate house just for it. My brother-in-law and I always enjoyed hearing about his hobby, and my father-in-law loved his caring son, Reagan. Eventually, my father-in-law's health began to decline, and after years of care, he passed away. After that, my husband proposed to me, saying, "Thank you for always taking care of my father. Let's continue to be together. Let's get married." Despite having worked hard on housework and caregiving, the moment I became immobile, my husband and mother-in-law's attitude changed as if I were worthless. Even I, normally composed, was infuriated. "Force me, please pay what you're supposed to," I demanded. "Well, I don't want any trouble, so I'll give you the house. Let's waive the division of other property," Brad conceded. I wondered if he would really give me the house, but since my father-in-law had left a substantial inheritance, it seemed plausible. The inheritance, divided among my mother-in-law, Brad, and Reagan, amounted to approximately $300,000 each, so Brad seemed to have enough assets. Reagan was tasked with handling all the paperwork with the executor, requiring several trips to the court, which was quite a hassle. No way, we can't give away the house. If we divide the property, I'll lose half my savings, Brad protested. It's just a wastefully large house in the countryside. Even if we give it away, it's not an issue. At the highest estimate, it's only worth about $100,000, and various fees will be deducted when we sell it. It's cheaper than losing half my savings, Reagan reasoned. Well, if you say so, Brad, but what if she demands more later? What if rumors spread in the neighborhood because we abandoned her? My mother-in-law worried. As they debated what to do with me, Reagan interrupted, then I'll take her in. Why would you go out of your way to do that? Brad asked suspiciously. You've been interested in Daisy, haven't you? That's why you're so willing. You can have her if you want, but she's no longer of any use to us. Don't ask to take Daisy and the house back later, okay? My mother-in-law sneered. Why would I? I just hope you won't come asking for money later. And remember, you can't return damaged goods, Reagan replied sharply. Brad and Reagan signed the papers and arranged to formally change the property title through a lawyer. I'll take out some money from my savings, so why don't you find a younger, healthier, and prettier woman to marry and build a better house, Reagan suggested. Sounds good, Brad agreed. Then he turned to me. Hey Daisy, get a lawyer to file for our divorce quickly. They said they'd stay in a hotel for a while and left the room. Reagan and I silently saw them off. I had to find a lawyer to file for our divorce first. With Reagan's help, I filed for the divorce, and in a few days, Brad and I became complete strangers. A week later, Brad and my mother-in-law packed their belongings and left the house. It was strange that Reagan, Brad's brother, continued to visit me. Now that I've divorced your brother, there's no need for you to worry about your former sister-in-law, I told him. He responded, I'm doing this because I wanted to let you know that I didn't get along with you just because you were my brother's wife. We both provided care and did housework together. We've talked a lot more in these 7 years than you ever did with my brother. We're friends, aren't we? Reagan said with a gentle smile. All I could do was express my thanks and gratitude. A month later, I was discharged from the hospital. Although I had to visit for physical therapy, I felt relieved to be home after such a long time. Do you think those two will ever come back? I'm worried they might return and make me work again, I confided. If they come back, I'll drive them away. I can't forgive them for treating you so horribly. Plus, they have no right to return to this house, Reagan reassured me. I was still unable to move as before, so Reagan took care of most of the household chores. Fortunately, as I had been working from home as a freelancer, I was able to return to work and contribute financially. Thanks to the bi-weekly physical therapy, I recovered smoothly without any complications. A year later, I was able to live as before, and Reagan and I collaborated on the housework. We spent more time together, syncing our days off to go on trips. Just when I thought our peaceful days would continue, a storm suddenly came. One night, while Reagan and I were eating dinner, there was a knock on the door and the intercom rang repeatedly. Nervously, I answered, and the person on the monitor was Brad. Hey, open up, he demanded, thinking this noise might disturb the neighbors. I opened the front door, and Brad entered the house without hesitation. What do you want? I asked, irritated by his sudden appearance. Why do I have to put up with such an attitude just for coming home? This isn't your home anymore. State your business and leave quickly, I demanded. What are you talking about? I'll be living here again from today. Oh, I'm hungry. Hey Daisy, give me some food, Brad demanded, expecting me to serve him. Hey, cut it out. Why are you here? I asked, growing increasingly frustrated. Well, I've spent almost all my money, and my mom will be here soon too, so leave the door unlocked, he said casually. As I remained silent, he remarked, Oh, you're all healed up, huh? That's great. Let's get back together. You must have had a hard time without me. His audacity made me feel sick. Stop it. I divorced you. I don't care about you anymore, I snapped. Don't get cocky. You've been living on my money all this time, and you can't do anything but housework. Just shut up and do as I say, Brad shouted, his voice dripping with entitlement. Just then, the door opened, and his mother arrived. You left the door unlocked. That's careless. Oh, what's going on? She asked, noticing the tension. She's been getting cheeky, so I was giving her a bit of education. She's grown thick-skinned in the year we've been away, Brad explained casually, as if it were a normal occurrence. Once again, Brad and his mother began to make themselves at home as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Enough is enough. This isn't your home. I'm calling the police, I declared, fed up with their intrusion. Oh yeah, about that. This house was originally in your father's name, right? So that means that the heir, including my mother, makes our agreement null and void, doesn't it? Brad shouted, making an unreasonable claim. You promised to give me the house. If you're nullifying that, then everything about the division of property should be nullified as well. Give me half the savings, he demanded. Sure, but I don't have it anymore. Didn't I tell you earlier? I've squandered it all. I quit my job, spent it all on booze, fun, investments, you name it. I also have some debts with consumer finance, about $20,000. Brad confessed, shocking me with his recklessness. I guess, can you pay for me? Brad asked, catching me off guard. Initially, I thought he was lying, but his mother confirmed it. I can't lend you that much money, I replied, taken aback. I'm not asking you to lend it. I'm telling you to pay it, Brad demanded. I'm not giving you any money. I'm calling the police, I declared, feeling the surge of anger. As Reagan dialed the police to report the situation, Brad's demeanor shifted. You've become quite daring in the past year. You're just showing off because Daisy's here, he sneered. Brad began to wreak havoc in the house, breaking precious furniture that had been my father-in-law's keepsake. His mother joined in, destroying furniture and laughing as she did so. It's my father's and aunt's, I pleaded, horrified by their rampage. About 10 minutes later, when the police arrived, I explained the situation to them. This is quite a mess. Let's hear your side of the story, the officer said. What's wrong with me breaking things in my own house? Brad retorted. That's right, we're just crushing things we don't need. What's the problem? His mother added. When the police seemed unsure how to respond, Reagan stepped in. This house has never belonged to these two. It's under Daisy's name. Huh? What kind of nonsense are you talking about? Brad exclaimed. Actually, before he passed away, our father-in-law left a will through a lawyer. Of course, you wouldn't know. You handed over what you were told and left the rest to Reagan. So this house was yours from the beginning, Reagan explained. As the truth sunk in, Brad and his mother stood dumbfounded. So, this isn't your property then, the officer clarified. Oh, hold on, but I'm her ex-husband. We're like family, so she'll forgive me, right? Brad attempted to reason. Don't make me laugh. You're a stranger once you're an ex. I don't even know that you were in contact with another woman before our divorce was finalized and who treated me like a maid if not you, I countered firmly. No, that's not what happened. I was just going along with what my mom said. She ordered me to do all this, Brad. What are you saying? Your failed business, your failed relationships with young girls, your gambling debts, aren't these all you're doing? His mother confessed, exposing his deceit. According to his mother, Brad had been trying to marry a young woman after our divorce, a revelation that left me stunned. He also quit his job to start his own business, but it failed in just a month. Even with money, Brad was rejected by the unemployed man and became reckless, going around playing and gambling, saying that he had money and could afford it. He had said that he had almost no money left, and it seemed that it was indeed nearly zero. You brought this upon yourself. All this is Brad's fault, so at least forgive me. They both desperately pleaded, trying to shift the blame and groveling. This was truly ridiculous. No, I won't forgive either of you. And this isn't something from the past, is it? You were treating me like a servant until a moment ago, right? I retorted firmly. Not leaving when I asked you to leave is illegal. And since the furniture collected by my late father-in-law is now mine, you'll need to compensate me for that, I demanded. But alright, we will compensate you. Just please don't get the police involved. You wouldn't want me to go to jail, would you? Brad pleaded desperately. I actually don't care at all. By the way, we're married, I revealed, shocking them both. It turned out I was married to my former brother-in-law, Reagan. He was now my husband. It hasn't even been a year, and you've moved on to another man, my own brother at that. Brad exclaimed in disbelief. What are you talking about? You moved on before you were even divorced, didn't you? You wouldn't return Daisy to me, no matter how many times I asked. Stop clinging to the past already, Reagan countered, leaving Brad speechless. I don't care anymore. I'll pay for whatever damages there are. How much for my idiot husband's junk? Reagan asked, taking charge of the situation. Well, if we calculate roughly about $100,000, I replied. What? Brad and his mother were shocked. The furniture that my father-in-law had collected was all high-end pieces made by famous designers. Brad and his mother, who had no interest in these items, seemed to have believed they were just junk. I explained. You're going to compensate for what you've broken, right? We're not sure if we can get the same items, but make sure to pay properly, Reagan asserted. Unable to afford such compensation, Brad and his mother were distraught. For the time being, the police took them away for trespassing and vandalism. Of course, I didn't forgive them and went ahead with the lawsuit. Afterwards, Brad and his mother, who were desperately seeking help from Reagan, were bluntly rejected, with him saying, "I'm ashamed to even be related by blood." Brad and his mother were likely receiving their just desserts together. And there's one more thing I kept secret. My father-in-law told me to sell the house and use the money as I wish. Reagan had told me that the price of the house was $100,000, but in reality, the document stated the value of the house around $500,000. It's a good location, so it might sell for a bit more. But for now, Reagan and I decided to take it easy in the house. My father-in-law left us with no plans to sell it. Eventually, we plan to sell the land and build a new house. I had some worries about having children, so after getting married to Reagan, I went to the gynecologist for a checkup. But there were no issues with either Reagan or me. Now, with the troublemakers gone, Reagan and I are living happily together. Hi, I'm Marie, and I'm 30 years old. I've been married to my husband, Sam, for 4 years. We really wanted to have kids right after we got married, but it just didn't happen for us. The doctors checked me out, and everything seemed fine, but Sam wasn't keen on getting checked himself. So we kind of gave up trying for a baby. Sometimes I wondered what might happen if Sam went for tests and treatment, but I realized that having a child isn't the only path to happiness. I never pushed him to go to the doctor. I work as an architect at a construction company, and I love what I do. My salary is good, and I find my job really fulfilling. So I started thinking that not having kids might be okay. Sam works for the government, and while he earns less than me, his job is stable. We have a great life together. We enjoy doing things we love, eating tasty food, and going on trips every now and then. That's Sally, my sister, calling me from outside the house with her sweet, pleading voice again. It's way too early for anyone to be dropping by, especially on a weekday. With a sigh, I made my way to the front door. Can you stop coming over so early? I'm sorry, but I've got something going on. Can you take care of Annie again? I looked after her just the other day, remember? Please, I need your help. Sally, who's 3 years younger than me, became a mom to Annie 4 years ago through a sudden marriage that didn't last long. Now she's raising Annie on her own. Lately, she's been relying on me to babysit several times a week for even the smallest reasons. It's urgent. I had no other choice, right? I have work too, but you're working from home, Marie. Just let her nap next to you, please, she asked, already placing Annie's things at the door as if it's already decided. Feeling unable to say no, I sighed and agreed to watch my niece. Thanks, I'll pick her up later, Sally said happily as she left. She was dressed up, wearing a short skirt. I wondered what she was up to. Watching her walk away in her high heels, I felt a mix of emotions. My 4-year-old niece is such a calm and easy child to care for. Sometimes she gets a bit teary, but her adorable smile makes everything better. Even though I thought having kids wasn't in the cards for us, spending time with her made me realize just how precious little ones can be. It saddens me to see her mom, my sister Sally, leaving her with me so often. I've mentioned to Sally that it's not ideal to leave her daughter so frequently, but I'm still happy to look after my niece. When Sally came to pick her up later that evening, she didn't even offer an apology. She just took her daughter and left in a hurry. Then my husband arrived home, and Sally left her child with us again for the day. I tried to talk to my husband about my day, but he seemed disinterested and barely responded. I understand that being a single mom is tough for Sally, but I also feel like my husband should be more supportive. He brushed off the conversation and went to take a shower. That's when I noticed his phone buzzing on the table, something he usually never leaves unattended. Curious, I glanced at the screen and saw that the caller was Sally. Confused, I wondered why she would be calling him. Before I could think too much about it, my husband returned and quickly grabbed his phone, rushing off to the bathroom. I tried to brush it off, but the message from Sally lingered in my mind. I need to see you urgently. Was Sally messaging my husband? Could he be cheating on me? These thoughts raced through my mind, but I couldn't find any solid answers. Since then, I never had another opportunity to check his phone. I'm feeling a bit peckish. Oh, sorry, sweetheart, I got distracted, I said as I lifted my niece into my arms. She looked up at me with those innocent eyes, melting my heart. If Sally is really having an affair with my husband, it means she's putting her desires ahead of her own child. How could she abandon such an adorable little girl? If my suspicions are true, I don't know if I could ever forgive either Sally or my husband. Here are the findings from the investigation. Thank you, I said, trying to steady my voice as I accepted the report from the detective agency I had hired. The results confirmed my worst fears. My husband was indeed having an affair. It hit me like a ton of bricks, but I managed to hold back my tears. I had mentally prepared myself for this moment. As it turned out, my husband and Sally were deeply involved in this affair. It wasn't just a one-time mistake or a brief lapse in judgment. They had been meeting several times a week, going to great lengths to cover their tracks. Looking back, I recalled how my husband, typically punctual and returning home from his government job, suddenly started working late on the days Sally brought my niece over. He always had some excuse ready to defend Sally's actions when she left her child with us. Why hadn't I noticed these patterns before? They both often came home at the same time, but I never connected the dots until now. Receiving the report, I was overwhelmed with uncertainty about what steps to take next. Should I confide in my parents or confront both of them? But before anything else, my niece came to mind. You're having an affair, aren't you? I confronted my husband abruptly, catching him off guard. What? No, what are you talking about? Don't spout nonsense, he retorted, clearly taken aback by my accusation. You're cheating with Sally, aren't you? I pressed, my certainty leaving him visibly flustered, his eyes darting around as if searching for an escape from the truth. Too late, I already know everything. Let's get a divorce, I declared firmly, his face flushed with anger at being labeled as the lowest of the low. But as I confronted the reality of my husband's affair with Sally, a cold numbness overtook me. I felt indifferent, detached from the situation. Both Sally and my husband seemed despicable for their betrayal. Despite being entitled to compensation in a divorce court, I couldn't bear the thought of my niece suffering. So I made the decision not to pursue compensation from Sally and to keep the affair a secret from our parents. Let me think about it. It's all so sudden, my husband replied, trying to regain his composure. Reluctantly, I agreed to give him time to process everything. Little did I know, it was a mistake. The next day, he didn't return home at his usual time. I waited anxiously, wondering if he and Sally were scheming something together. Despite my concerns, I chose to wait without reaching out to him. I was startled by the sound of a child crying nearby. Stepping outside, I couldn't believe what I saw. Annie, my niece, wrapped in a blanket, stood alone in front of my house, looking lost. My heart sank as I watched Sally and my husband speed away in their car. I hesitated for a moment, torn between chasing after them and staying with Annie, who was crying inconsolably. In the end, I couldn't leave her behind, so I stayed and watched their car disappear into the distance. How could they abandon a child like that? What if something terrible had happened to Annie while they were gone? The mere thought sent chills down my spine, filling me with anger towards the two people who could so callously neglect their responsibilities. They weren't human, they were monsters. As I lifted Annie into my arms, I noticed several papers bundled up with her blanket. Among them were divorce papers with my husband's signature and letters from both him and Sally. They apologized for their actions, expressing their love for each other and their desire to be together. They left Annie in my care. Reading those words filled me with a tumult of emotions, frustration, anger, and a profound sense of betrayal. Unable to contain my feelings any longer, I broke down in tears, overwhelmed by the sudden and drastic turn of events. I decided to confide in my parents about everything that had unfolded, including Annie being abandoned. They rushed over as soon as they could. Through tears, I showed them the evidence of Sally and my husband's affair, explaining the whole situation. Mom hugged me tightly, offering comfort, while Dad's hands trembled with anger. "What's your plan now?" Dad asked, his voice tense with emotion. "I'm filing for divorce," I replied firmly. "Good, that's the right decision. We'll need to discuss this with your husband's parents as well," Dad insisted. My parents were determined to sever ties with Sally. They made it clear that even if she sought refuge with them, they wouldn't offer any help. "Annie is our precious granddaughter. We'll take care of her," Dad declared, his gaze resting on Annie, who was peacefully sleeping. Mom's eyes were downcast, tears welling up. "No, I'll take care of her," I asserted, my decision unwavering. "You don't have to do that. Consider what they've done." "You don't owe them anything," Mom urged, concerned that I might be swayed by Sally and my husband's letters. But my resolve was firm. "Annie is incredibly dear to me. I see her as my own child. I want to adopt her," I explained. My parents seemed troubled but respected my decision. They assured me of their support and urged me to consult them whenever needed, which brought me some comfort. The next day, I decided to inquire about my husband's whereabouts at his workplace, only to discover that he had already resigned. I was certain he had vanished without a trace. When I checked our bank account, it was wiped clean. I couldn't help but be impressed by how swiftly he had managed to empty it all in just one day. However, only a small portion of the money, which was in an account my husband had easy access to, had been withdrawn. The rest of our savings were safely tucked away in another account. I had made the decision to transfer the funds as a precaution, and now I was grateful for that foresight. It was a small move on my part, but it saved us from financial ruin. I also reached out to Sally's ex-husband, hoping he might want to be involved in his daughter's life, but he showed no interest. It pained me to think about my niece's situation, but I was determined to give her all the love and care she deserved. After finalizing my divorce, I officially adopted my niece. Together, we embarked on a fresh start in a new location. Life presented its challenges, but it was also filled with joy. My niece taught me the highs and lows of parenthood, and as the years went by, I cherished every moment, especially the day she called me Mom for the first time. Despite the hardships we faced, the love I felt for my daughter gave me strength to persevere. Balancing work and parenting, a decade flew by in the blink of an eye. Then on the day my daughter turned 14, I received an unexpected call on my cell phone. "Mom, there's a call for you," my daughter called from the other room. "Okay," I replied, glancing at the screen, which displayed only a phone number. I wondered who could be calling. Curiosity piqued, I answered, and a familiar voice greeted me from the other end. "Hi Marie, it's Sally. It's been a while." It was Sally. Even after all these years, she spoke as if nothing had changed. Her casual tone made their sudden reappearance feel surreal. "Mom, are you okay?" my daughter asked, concern evident in her voice. "Yes, I'll handle it, but you should stay back. Can you call Grandma and let her know Sally's here?" "Phil, do you understand?" I instructed my daughter, sensing the seriousness of the situation. She nodded firmly and quickly made the call to my mom. As she did, I closed the door to the living room, preparing myself for what was to come, and then opened the front door to confront Sally. "I knew you were here. This isn't acceptable. You're disturbing the neighbors," I stated firmly as I faced Sally, who stood on my doorstep. "Well, you took forever to answer the door. Isn't that right?" Sally retorted casually. "It's been too long." Behind Sally, my ex-husband stood awkwardly, a surprise I hadn't anticipated. The two of them, who I hadn't seen in a decade, looked different. My ex-husband appeared worn out, while Sally seemed to be trying to maintain a youthful appearance but instead appeared older than her years. "I'm not comfortable with this sudden visit. Please leave. I came for my daughter. Is she here?" I demanded. "Stop. You're not coming in," I interrupted firmly. "Why? She's my daughter. If you don't let us in, I'll have to call the police." "This is trespassing," Sally argued. "What?" Sally's irritation at my firm refusal was evident as she raised her voice towards the house. "Hey Annie, you're in there, right? Stop this nonsense. Why are you interfering? Do you really think you're her real mom, Marie? You're nothing but a fraud. I'm the one who carried her in my womb and gave birth to her. A real mom is obviously superior." I wanted to retort to remind Sally of her decade-long absence and abandonment of Annie, but I hesitated, considering that my daughter might still harbor some curiosity about her biological mother. With that in mind, I found myself at a loss for words. Seeing my hesitation, Sally laughed triumphantly and pushed past me, striding into the house. "Annie, Mom." "Ha, you've grown up. I'm your real mom," Sally declared. Confused by the sudden intrusion, my daughter looked at Sally with a mix of fear and uncertainty. Sensing my daughter's unease, Sally's expression twisted into one of displeasure. "Has this woman been filling your head with lies about me? It's all untrue. She's the one who took you from me and pretended to be your mom. I'm your real mother, Sally insisted, her gaze shifting from me to my daughter. My daughter, angered by Sally's attitude, exclaimed, "Liar." "Yes, your aunt is the real liar, not me," Sally retorted. "What?" My daughter pointed directly at Sally, stunning both of us with her unexpected outburst. "Do you know how old I am? I'm almost 16, not 15. My mom raised me all these years, but she never told me about you. Still, I remember a little about you." Both Sally and I were speechless as my daughter continued, "I remember you yelling at me, not giving me food." "What? I never did such a thing," Sally denied vehemently. "You're not my mom. I have only one mom, not the one who gave birth to me, but the one who cared for and loved me. That's this mom," my daughter declared, pointing at me with conviction. My daughter gripped my sleeve tightly, and a surge of emotion overwhelmed me, threatening to spill tears. "What?" Sally exclaimed in frustration, her hand lifting as if to strike. Instinctively, I moved to shield my daughter, but Sally's movement abruptly halted. "Dad, it's you." My husband had returned without my notice, and he swiftly intervened, grasping Sally's arm and preventing any harm. Informed of the situation, he understood that Sally was the aggressor, while my ex-husband stood bewildered nearby, watching with a sharp gaze. "Are you both all right?" my husband asked calmly, his reassuring presence bringing a sense of relief to my daughter and me. "Yes," we both replied, reassured by the steadiness in his eyes. "You were married." My ex-husband, who had failed to intervene in Sally's violence, was taken aback. "That's none of your concern," I responded firmly. "How dare you remarry without me? You left me and vanished after the divorce, remember?" My ex-husband's accusatory tone was met with stern gazes from both my husband and me, leaving him speechless. "What? Marie remarried? Living in this grand house with a husband? This is absurd. I took everything from her. Why does she seem happy?" Sally's voice cracked as she screamed, her disheveled hair adding to her erratic appearance. "These people have treated Mom horribly. My mom is only my mom," my typically reserved daughter passionately defended me. "It's all right. Stay here with Mom. Your parents are here too. We'll sort this out," my husband assured us, his gentle touch steadying me as I realized I was trembling uncontrollably. My husband escorted Sally and my ex-husband outside, their voices filled with nonsensical shouts. "Mom, are you okay?" My daughter's concern was evident in her voice. "I'm sorry. I should have talked to you," I apologized, feeling a pang of regret. "No, it's okay. I never told you either. I remembered my biological parents and thought you might be disappointed. If only I had done the right thing, I wouldn't have made you feel so insecure," my daughter admitted, her words heavy with remorse. "I know you kept silent thinking of me." "Me?" I replied, tears streaming down my face as we embraced each other tightly. Fear, relief, and happiness mingled together as we cried together, the weight of the recent events finally released. Sally and my ex-husband were sternly reprimanded by my husband and parents for their unreasonable behavior. Despite their persistent attempts to reclaim my daughter, their motives were purely self-serving. My daughter's biological father, Sally's ex-husband, had recently passed away, leaving behind a significant inheritance for Annie, his legitimate daughter. Sally and my ex-husband sought to gain control of my daughter in pursuit of this inheritance. Sally, desperate for money, sought refuge at her parents' home, only to be turned away and ostracized. Though my daughter discovered the truth in a painful manner, she bravely accepted it and forged ahead. With the unwavering support of my loving daughter and devoted husband, I realized that family goes beyond blood ties. Our bond is rooted in love and resilience, surpassing any genetic connection. As I prepared breakfast with my daughter on a Sunday morning, I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed with gratitude for our happiness and the strength of our family bond.
I recently became a parent. Jessica, the person who took Michael away from me by pretending to be pregnant, sent me a message demanding a $5,000 baby shower gift. Even though I've moved on and remarried, Jessica's presence still bothers me. Despite being my sister, she hasn't changed and continues to cause trouble without any concern. John, a friend, suggested we attend the celebration, and I reluctantly agreed, trusting that he has a plan to deal with Jessica's antics. While Jessica may find it amusing now, I believe she'll face consequences for her actions soon. As for me, my name is John Johnson, and I work as an office assistant in a local company. Shifting to a different story, I've been dating someone since my college days. I met Michael Smith, a medical student, through club activities. He comes from a family of allergy specialists, and his father's clinic is well known across the country. Initially, I thought Michael was just a smart and wealthy guy due to his family background. But as we got to know each other, I discovered his uniqueness. We bonded over our shared interest in a film director's work, and my initiative to invite him to a movie paid off. He began to see me as someone special. Our relationship extended beyond college, and Michael proposed when I was 25. He shared his aspiration to become a great doctor, eventually taking over his dad's clinic. Excitedly, he asked me to be part of this journey with him, and I gladly accepted. Pregnant shortly after our wedding, I was elated, believing Michael would be an excellent father. The baby's health was my primary concern, regardless of gender. However, my joy turned to despair when severe morning sickness hit me hard. Constant nausea forced me to resign from my job, and I found solace in eating to combat the sickness. The house became a mess with snack wrappers and bread bags scattered around. Returning home one day, Michael expressed his disappointment about the chaotic state of our home and my apparent weight gain. I explained that the morning sickness compelled me to eat constantly. Instead of empathy, he cruelly compared me to a pig that had given up on staying slim, laughing mockingly at my struggle. Shocked by his insensitivity, I clung to the hope that he would return to his kind self after the baby's birth, but that hope too would soon be shattered. One day, my sister Jessica paid a visit. "Hey, Naomi, you're here. Place looks a bit chaotic though. Sorry about the mess." "No worries. I'm used to it. It's like a second home." Jessica, my sister, appeared before me, worn out and struggling with morning sickness. Despite her occasional visits, I was too unwell to entertain her properly. Hoping for a distraction, I started a conversation, sharing the news that it seemed the baby in my belly was a girl. "Wow, didn't know you were already thinking about dressing up and shopping. Does Michael know?" "Yep, it's going to be a girl," I told Michael right away. "I dream of wearing matching outfits with my child." "Jessica, you've always been stylish. I'll count on your advice when the time comes." Jessica turned around, smiling meaningfully. "That's right. Michael is still a rookie doctor, but he'll eventually take over the family clinic." "Stop it, Jessica. That's too harsh. You really have a sharp tongue." Jessica is sarcastic and sometimes hits hard with her words. As her younger sister, I've grown used to it, but it can be tough when I'm unwell. Jessica quickly switched back to her usual smile. "Sorry, slipped into my usual mode. So Naomi, anything bothering you lately?" "Well, Michael's been coming home late. As a doctor, it's unavoidable. But he's at the hospital all the time, even on weekends. We hardly have time to talk these days." "I see, not surprising for someone claiming to be a doctor's wife like you." Jessica's icy smile sent a chill down my spine. "Well, I came to talk to you today." As she spoke, Jessica glanced toward the living room door, and entering from there was Michael. "Michael, did you finish work early at the hospital today? We need to talk. Let's get a divorce." "What kind of joke is this? What do you mean?" As soon as I returned home, Michael's words confused me. I knew he wasn't the type to make a terrible joke, especially given our long relationship since college and the fact that I was carrying his child. "Look, your beloved husband is saying this. You should listen to his request and let go quickly." Jessica's shocking statement left me in disbelief. Michael awkwardly looked at me. "I can't see you as a woman anymore after you kept eating and gaining weight. But this is morning sickness. I feel sick if I don't eat." Jessica triumphantly stared at me. "That's the way it is, and the baby in your belly, being a girl, won't be the heir to the Smith Clinic." But I carried Michael's child in my belly, a suitable heir. I felt a sinking feeling as Jessica lovingly stroked her belly. "I'm 3 months pregnant, and it's a boy, according to the tests." "You can't be serious. I just had a baby. What are you doing while I'm going through all this pain?" Your excuses, quitting your job, and just eating all the time are unacceptable. I'm tired of watching you lying around, constantly eating snacks. I take care of myself, so I don't have morning sickness, even when pregnant. I won't lose my self-control and eat like a pig, unlike you. I was at a loss for words, seeing Jessica's smug face, and Michael looking down at the floor, guilt-ridden. While I didn't know about Jessica being pregnant with a boy, as an heir, I wanted a son. I value a beautiful wife like Jessica over someone who indiscriminately gains weight. Isn't that just a desire for an heir, while a beautiful wife is your own selfish preference? I'll pay alimony, so let's part without any fuss. Witnessing Michael's apology, I realized that our relationship could never return to its former state. Following the divorce, I became a single mother and gave birth to our daughter. Unfortunately, Michael's promise of alimony turned out to be mere words with no actual financial support. After childbirth, I had to work to make ends meet since I had no one to rely on. Unsure of my options, I took a job at a nearby department store that was hiring. Life took an unexpected turn, and my hard work and character caught the attention of John Johnson, a highly regarded manager in the external sales department. Tough day. You're always working hard. Thanks. I'm about to finish up soon. Are you done for the day, John? Yeah. Oh, there's this great Italian place nearby. I want you to try, Naomi. And it's a little gift for your daughter. Through casual conversations, our connection grew, leading to dating and eventually our remarriage. Naomi, I might be a guy 20 years older than you, but I sincerely want to make you and your daughter happy. Will you marry me? Are you sure about me? I'd be delighted. Life after remarriage was truly blissful, a kind husband, and my daughter and I enjoyed a peaceful life. However, I failed to notice the ominous footsteps approaching our tranquil days. One day, while Jan was at work and I had some time off, an email arrived. It was from Jessica, and the content was shocking. A baby is born. I'm expecting a $5,000 baby shower gift. A gasp escaped me as I read that abrupt email. Memories flooded back from 5 years ago when Jessica had an affair with Michael and took him away. Now this, asking for a $5,000 baby shower gift, seemed excessive. I couldn't forget that day, the expressions on Jessica and Michael's faces. Their disregard for my suffering from morning sickness was unforgivable. Uncertain about how to respond to Jessica's email, John returned from work, sensing something was amiss. Concerned, he asked, "What's wrong, Naomi? You look pale." "Oh, John, it's a message from my sister. She had a baby. The sister who married your ex-husband, Michael." "Yeah, I don't want to see her face or hear from her. Plus, she's asking for a $5,000 baby shower gift." As John listened and glanced at my phone, he suddenly said, "Wait, this Jessica Smith name, you know her? I didn't mention her when we got married because I didn't want to remember." "Yeah, I've never been introduced to her by you, but I wonder." John, contemplating while looking at the email, seemed to recall something. "We didn't properly greet her during our wedding, so let's visit her now. Also, I just remembered something I needed to do back at the department store." He quickly prepared to leave. Going back to the department store now. "Sorry, there's something I need to do." A few hours later, John returned with a thick file. "Is it okay if we visit your sister, Jessica, 2 weeks from now on Sunday? We both have the day off, and I'd like her to meet my parents and cousins too." "Your parents and cousins too?" "Jessica loves being the center of attention, so she'll probably be fine." "But why?" "I've heard your ex-husband, Michael, is famous for allergy treatment. My family has a history of allergies. Thought we might get some good advice." I remembered hearing from friends that Michael had taken over his father's allergy clinic. Michael's dad was an authority on allergy treatment, and Michael became an allergist too. A friend told me. "Okay, I'll contact Jessica." Jessica quickly agreed when I contacted her. "I want to see the baby and will bring a gift. Can I bring some relatives too? They really want to meet you. Of course, the more guests, the more gifts. Looking forward to seeing you in 2 weeks on Sunday." 2 weeks later, on Sunday, I visited Jessica's house with John, his parents, and relatives, including his cousins. In a quiet residential area, her stylish house stood next to the clinic, its white walls gleaming. John's parents and relatives were surprised by its luxurious design, excited to meet the renowned allergist. "Welcome. I've been waiting for you." "Long time no see, Jessica. You look happy." "Of course. I was worried about my first child's birth, but it all worked out in the end." I felt something off in Jessica's words. "First childbirth? Didn't you say you were pregnant with a boy before?" "Oh, did I not tell you? I miscarried that time, so this is my first." John, standing beside me, nodded meaningfully. Seeing John's face, Jessica started to tremble. "Oh, hello. Nice to meet you." "Hello, you must be Naomi's sister. I heard a bit about the miscarriage." "Yes, but I don't want to remember the miscarriage." Jessica turned her face away in a huff and started to walk off. "Sorry about that." "Oh, there's something I wanted to give you, Jessica." "What? Something for me?" Jan handed her an envelope. It's pastel-colored, and the word congratulations written on it, thick enough to be noticeable even from the side. "Here you go. I wanted to give this to Jessica personally. Got it right?" "Just what I've been waiting for." I glanced at John and whispered to him, "Hey, we aren't rich, and we don't have to give Jessica the $5,000 she asked for." But John, unfazed, pet me off. "It's fine. Trust me. You'll understand if you watch." "What do you mean if I watch?" While we were talking about the envelope, Jessica had already started opening it. "I need to check if it's exactly $5,000. With this thickness, it might even be $10,000. The cute envelope was torn open with a ripping sound. Jessica's face clouded over the moment she opened it. "What's this?" John stepped forward with a salesperson's smile to explain. "Mrs. Jessica Smith, this is a detailed statement of your purchases at the department store over the past 5 years. You said to put it on my tab, and this is the amount you've accumulated to date." "What are you talking about? I don't know anything about this." Jessica held a statement listing names of luxury watches and brand bags. Seeing the 5-digit figure in the amount column, I was in disbelief. Indeed, Mr. Michael Smith himself and his parents are valued customers with an external sales card contract. However, with such a high amount, we needed to confirm, just to be sure. My husband is the famous allergist Michael Smith. As the wife of the clinic's director, using 1 or 2 external sales cards is nothing, is that so? Also, there's something else I personally wanted to verify. John paused before continuing. About 5 years ago, we had complaints about a customer flaunting their external sales card and making extremely unpleasant remarks. "Do you know anything about this?" "What's that? What does it matter?" Since we had several complaints, I checked with the staff who were nearby at the time. The content of the conversation was so terrible that the staff remembered it clearly. Glancing sideways, I saw Jessica's expression harden. The staff said the conversation was about stealing someone's husband, who happens to be her brother-in-law. Could it be? "Yes, that's right." And she bragged about using a fake pregnancy to break them up, laughing loudly. She talked about how she lied about miscarrying like it was some kind of heroic tale. That's when I realized that time. Jessica's claim of being pregnant with a boy, the hair, was all a lie to snatch Michael. Of course, there was no pregnancy, so no morning sickness or changes in her body shape. "What are you saying? That story was about me?" Matching the complaints with the external sales card, your name, Jessica Smith, came up. "I can't believe this. You are marrying into a doctor's family, becoming the clinic director's wife." I couldn't stand it. I had to do whatever it took to tell Michael that I was the right one for him. I couldn't believe that Michael had fallen for Jessica's scheme, and she had lied to marry him. While I was in shock, the door opened. "What's this all about? Explain yourself, Jessica. Since when have you been here?" "From the beginning. I came back to get something I forgot and found the external sales card statement. And now, I hear the pregnancy 5 years ago was all a lie." "You trapped me," Michael shouted, And Jessica began to laugh. So what? You got a beautiful wife, and we have a child now, so it's fine, right? Don't joke with me. I can't live with a liar like you. Let's get a divorce. You can't be serious. What about our child? Don't you feel sorry for them? Pushing her away, Michael glared at Jessica with a furious expression. I can't live with a liar and reckless spender like you. It's not good for the child either. We're getting a divorce. I'm taking custody. Are you kidding me? Do you have any idea what I went through to give birth to this child? This child needs to become a doctor in the future to support us. You're just thinking about yourself. There's no point in talking about this now. Let's handle the rest through a lawyer. The relatives who came along hoping to get some effective medicine from the famous allergist were frozen in shock at this chaotic scene. I was so embarrassed to admit that she was my sister. Afterward, Michael got a good lawyer specializing in divorce and successfully got divorced and won custody. Meanwhile, Jessica, who had been shopping to her heart's content on credit using the external sales card during her marriage, was now being chased for repayments. Hey, if your husband hadn't brought that statement, I'd still be the clinic director's wife. I'm being hounded for repayments now. Help your sister out in a pinch, will you? Why should I? You brought this on yourself, didn't you? And you should pay for your own shopping. Unexpectedly, I got a message from Michael via social media. Hey, can we start over? If Jessica hadn't lied about having a boy 5 years ago, we would have been fine as a couple. I want to see our daughter too. I have forgotten how you left me suffering with morning sickness and mocked me, then cheated on me. After 5 years of no contact, the last thing I wanted was to see his face again. Michael seemed to be struggling to keep the clinic he inherited from his father running, but he couldn't stop gossip due to the infidelity rumors. Patients stopped coming to the Smith Clinic, which Michael inherited, had a 1-star rating and unbelievably bad reviews on a hospital review site. It seemed only a matter of time before he would have to close the clinic. He was so fixated on inheriting, ironically. He was so obsessed with having a male heir. My husband, daughter, and I continue to live happily as a family. Naomi, are you ready? Shall we head out soon? Yes, I was just remembering how delicious the spaghetti you brought me from that restaurant was back when I was a single mother. Jen used to order from a restaurant for takeout as a way to approach me back then. My daughter was small, and since we weren't dating, we never ate at the restaurant, just as colleagues. You had just gotten divorced and were having a hard time, right? I thought even a little bit of delicious food could bring you happiness. It was your kindness that drew me to you, the dish that brought us together. Back then, it was just my daughter and me eating takeout, but now it's different. I'm happy that we can eat together as a family. Who would have thought that a day like this, going out with you and our daughter, would come?